This video aims to go through the RO12 Cambridge National IT exam. It isn't going to tell you the structure of the exam because that changes every single time. However, what it will do is it'll tell you about some key little takeaways from the specification that you can use to better your understanding of how the exam is asking you the questions that it is and how you can go about answering them. The exam itself is 1 hour 45 minutes and you've got 80 marks worth of questions to answer. OCR, the exam board, write the exam and they mark the exam. We won't see the exam that you do until after you've finished it. Okay, so we don't know what's going to come up on it. What we do know is that the exam will only assess your understanding of LO1, LO3, LO4 and LO6. LO1 is understanding the tools and techniques that can be used to initiate and plan solutions. This is your understanding of all of those initiation and planning documents that you've created for RO13, how they might be used, when they could be used, and applying them to a given scenario which you'll have in the exam. LO3 is all about understanding how data and information can be collected, stored and used. This is looking at ways in which data can be collected from the public, from the general people within a business. It's then looking at when this data is collected, how may a business store that data legally and effectively, and then how can they use it in line with the law. LO4 is understanding the factors to be considered when collecting and processing data and storing that data. So there are varying factors, such as where the data might be stored, what the data is about. If it's non-sensitive, that'll impact the way in which we can store it, and also the way in which a company might use it. This again will be you're applying it to a certain scenario, and I'll come on to those scenarios in a little while. LO6, which is the final learning objective within the specification you'll be assessed on, is understanding the different methods of processing data and presenting information. So how do you take raw data, just numbers, facts and figures, and present it in a way that's suitable for a client? You will not be assessed in this exam on LO2, LO5 or LO7. So there is no need to revise the content from the specification on these learning objectives. The exam board outlined this very short list of command words. These command words will appear within your exam. You need to know these command words intrinsically. You need to understand what it is that these command words mean and also what you need to do when you see them. There is a stark difference between a question that asks you to describe and discuss, for instance. There is a difference between you identifying and justifying your answer. In the specification, which can be found on the departmental website, you'll be able to find a range of support materials on these command words, on what they're about and how you answer these questions. It's really important ahead of your exam that you go and you look at each of these command words and you understand what they mean according to this exam. Don't just assume that you know what it means simply because you know what that word means. So why am I doing this exam? Well, you will sit an exam to assess your knowledge and understanding of different technology. That's the hardware and software applications. It's to assess your knowledge of the tools and techniques that are used to select, store, manipulate, present data and information to given scenarios and people. This is your non-practical application of knowledge. The practical application of knowledge is the RO13, and everything you've learned and done in RO13, the coursework unit, can be applied here through your understanding of these pieces of information, but not explicitly as an examined content. This is going to be your ability to recall information, to delve into your memory and understand information and then explain it, rather than being able to show that you can do it. You'll also be assessed on what phase of the project lifecycle are, the interaction between these phases, and the inputs and outputs within each phase. That table within the specification has to become second knowledge to you. You should be able to state very clearly the interactions between each stage of the project lifecycle. In my experience, there are 6 to 8 marks available every single exam talking about the inputs, outputs and interactions. That's 6 to 8 very easy marks. Using your understanding of the project lifecycle together with your knowledge of various information technologies, you'll be prepared to develop technological solutions. So what they believe is that this knowledge which you're applying in this exam can lead to your understanding of the coursework, Well, you've already done the coursework. You've already done these tasks. You've already completed the information that's required for that coursework. So therefore, backdate your knowledge. How did you come to the decision that you did to use the elements that you did within your coursework? Why did you choose one planning tool over another? What made that planning tool appropriate for the scenario in your coursework? You will need to understand the different risks associated with the collection, storage and use of data, and how the legal, moral, ethical and security issues can have an impact on organisations and individuals. When it comes to legality, you need to know a few different pieces of legislation. You need to know the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. You need to know the GDPR or Data Protection Act. You need to know the Computer Misuse Act, and you need to know the principles of RIPA, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Once you know these principles and the key strands of each of those, you need to be able to apply them to the collection, storage and use of data. GDPR, or Data Protection Act, is a key one here, and you need to know the key 6 or 8 principles depending on which one you're looking at and how you apply them. In this exam, it will not be of detriment to you to talk about Data Protection Act, even though this legislation is obsolete. You also need to understand how such risks can be mitigated. So you need to be able to talk at length about how, yes, this is a problem, but this is how this customer or this client could get around it. Your knowledge and understanding will help you to make decisions and appropriate choices when developing a technological solution. So again, they're saying that you've got the knowledge and you're able to apply it in a coursework related scenario. You've already done the coursework, so now it's about underpicking that knowledge and saying, I understand why I did what I did in my coursework because of my understanding here. So the 80 marks in the exam are going to be broken up into a series of smaller sections relating to scenarios. In my experience, there are usually 4 to 5 scenarios. It's very, very clear what the scenario is, and they tell you at the top of the page questions 1 to 5, 1 to 6, whatever it might be, are related to the following scenario. The scenarios will be in a rectangular box and you need to read them. You may have some familiarity with the scenario. You may think, oh, I've seen one of these before, or I know a little bit about this, but you might not. Don't be thrown if you don't. The underlying fundamental thing is, are you able to talk about IT? IT doesn't change. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about a scenario for a boxing club, for a sports brand, for a dog groomers, or for a fish company. The IT systems remain the same. You must, where possible, use the scenario in your answer and not simply provide a generic answer. They're looking for your ability to apply your knowledge to the scenario. So if there is anything of a 3-mark quality or more, they're looking for you to relate it back to the scenario, and you must do that in order to get the higher marks. When you've written your answer out, you need to read it and you need to think, does this make sense? Is it clear? Does this end user, whoever that end user might be, have a clear understanding of what I'm trying to say here? If at all you're thinking, I don't know, I might have used technical language there, rewrite it. In an exam, it doesn't matter if you ask for some extra paper and rewrite your question answer out, as long as it's clear. It doesn't matter if you ask for some extra paper to do some doodling on and a little bit of a mind map or a plan. It really doesn't matter. Don't be limited to those 3 or 4 lines, okay? You've got to remember that you are the IT professional. What I always say to you, and you should have heard me say it, does your answer demonstrate knowledge beyond that of a regular person? If I met Joe Bloggs in the street and I said, right, I've got this business and I want to make my processes quicker because at the moment I'm taking orders over the phone, I write them down and then give them to the kitchen. Do you know any way I could do that? They're more than likely going to say, have you thought about like a till system where it just comes up in the kitchen? They didn't need to do an IT qualification to come up with that answer, and neither do you. You have done the IT qualification, so we're expecting to hear and see a little bit more from you. These scenarios will change and they will switch and change throughout the whole of the exam. You need to read them, do a keyword analysis on them, write down what it is that this company does, what it is they're looking for on every scenario. You've got 1 hour 45 minutes. That's 105 minutes. You've got 80 marks, meaning you've got 25 minutes of spare time. If we're working on a mark a minute, use it. Use it to read the scenario, understand the scenario, and make notes on the scenario. I hope that's been useful for you, and I hope that it does you well in the exam. Best of luck.